Pete finished reading and simply said, "Wow, yeah, that's good, isn't it?" I must confess that I stole many of the words from a story I saw on an erotic fiction site by a guy named Biggie33, who wrote, "We need to talk. Why did you call the letter an investment in our future? Don't you see? I asked my husband for permission to have sex outside of marriage. If he agrees, then when we go back, we can move on with our lives without guilt," Laura mentally added. "Well, I can go on 2 weeks with you, and I'll be sure I don't need you anymore, but your replacement, that's a whole other story. You're so sure he'll agree?" Of course, I gave the impression he had a choice, but that's only so he can convince himself he's in control. If he dares to say no, we'll have to keep sneaking around like before. So, how do you like that?
Laura and Pete sat intertwined in the departure lounge awaiting their flight to Bali, a mix of excitement and relief washing over them as they embarked on their much-needed vacation. With the hassle of preparations behind them, Laura savored the moment, her eyes shutting against the early morning light after a passionate night. The prospect of 2 weeks filled with sunshine and intimacy was a welcome reprieve from the stresses of life. As Pete reached for his phone, a sudden message alert broke the tranquility. "Hey Laura, remember to switch your phone to airplane mode," he reminded her absent-mindedly, his attention captured by the screen's message. "I left my phone behind," Pete confessed, his focus still on the device in his hand. Laura, observing his expression shift, grew concerned. "What's wrong, Pete?" Handing her the phone, Pete's anxiety was palpable as Laura scanned the message. "Peter, how could you betray me like this? You'll regret it forever." "You're a fool, Pete, and your wife will know," the message accused. Laura scanned the lounge, searching for any hint of familiarity among the faces. "It can't be my wife," Pete protested. "I packed everything last night while she slept, and we said our goodbyes this morning. She's none the wiser." "Perhaps it's a mistake," Laura suggested optimistically, trying to calm Pete's nerves. "Let's contact Penny and your husband. Maybe they'll shed some light on this mystery." Laura watched Pete press the speed dial number. There was no answer, and he left a message saying that he missed her already. Pete hung up the phone and looked at Laura puzzled. "Are you going to call your husband?" "I didn't bring my phone with me, you can use mine." Laura started to reach for the proffered phone, but then they both realized how stupid it was. For the first time, Laura began to regret the decision. Further conversation was interrupted by the call to board the plane. They stood in line together, but they were no longer comfortable holding hands in public. Laura noticed Pete scanning the passengers, looking for familiar faces. Laura was vaguely amused by this. He continued his search as they walked to their seats. They took their assigned seats, and once seated, Laura intertwined her arm with his and rested her head on his shoulder. "Why didn't you bring your phone with you, Laura?" "It's all part of my cunning plan. You'll be proud of me for it. I'll show you once we're in the air." Half an hour later, the plane gained altitude, and Laura pulled her laptop out of her bag. She started it up and went to a Word document. "I have invested in our future, lover. When my husband goes to bed tonight, he will find a letter from me. If he doesn't agree with what it says, we will lose nothing, and if he does, this trip will just be the beginning of a new life for both of us. Here's a copy." She handed the computer to Pete. "My dear husband, I love you and only you, and have loved you since we met 25 years ago. I look forward to spending the next 25 years or more with you. It is what I always wanted and what I still truly desire. I love you more and more each day and have happily devoted my life to taking care of you and our wonderful children. With the exception of some visits to friends, I have asked for almost nothing for myself. I know that you love me and always want me to be happy and satisfied. Since we love each other, I want to propose something to you. I have purposely approached it in such a way that you have 2 whole weeks to think about my idea. If we were to do it face to face, there would be a great danger of you becoming macho to me and saying something that we might not be able to get past. I can't take that risk. It's the same reason I left my phone there so you can't contact me for the entire 2 weeks. I'm not on a work course, and no one there knows where I am, so don't waste your time trying to contact me. Darling, you are a wonderful lover, and I never tire of being in your arms. However, I miss arousing sex with other people so much that I risk incurring your wrath by doing what I do. Before you get too angry, just keep things in context. I'm going away for 2 weeks with a friend from work. I have never been unfaithful to you, and without your full blessing, I never will be. I propose the following: with your blessing, I would like to have sex with other men. I feel that my needs have grown to the point that one man, even one as talented as you, will not be able to fulfill them. It will never be someone you know, and I promise to always be discreet. In fact, I will be so discreet that you won't even know when or where, unless you want me to. At the slightest hint that anyone we know suspects what I am up to, I will stop immediately. You will always have me whenever you want me, and nothing about that will change. You are my husband, and your needs will always come first. I want you to be assured that this will not change the way I feel about you or our lovemaking together. In short, it will not affect us in any way, shape, or form. Think about it for the next 2 weeks, please, darling. If you love me as much as you say you do, you will jump at this opportunity to prove it. I know how much you love me, and that knowledge will be with me every time. I fall asleep at night while I'm away, so I trust that you will spoil me. Now, please, my dear, think about it for the next 2 weeks. If your answer is no, I will honor your wish and would appreciate the opportunity to talk more. I will try not to take too much offense at the names you call me and your implied lack of trust. If your answer is yes, then all you have to do is say, the answer is yes, and we won't have to talk about it again, though I'd be happy to if you'd like to. Your loving wife, Laura. Pete finished reading and simply said, "Wow, yeah, that's good, isn't it?" I must confess that I stole many of the words from a story I saw on an erotic fiction site by a guy named Biggie33, who wrote, "We need to talk. Why did you call the letter an investment in our future? Don't you see? I asked my husband for permission to have sex outside of marriage. If he agrees, then when we go back, we can move on with our lives without guilt," Laura mentally added. "Well, I can go on 2 weeks with you, and I'll be sure I don't need you anymore, but your replacement, that's a whole other story. You're so sure he'll agree?" Of course, I gave the impression he had a choice, but that's only so he can convince himself he's in control. If he dares to say no, we'll have to keep sneaking around like before. So, how do you like that? Not bad, decisive, and logical. However, it's a decision he will never base on logic. I hope he's not a real man, otherwise, it's a bit insulting, Pete commented. What? There's no way he was offended by anything in that letter. It took me a few days to get it exactly right. Yes, but you have to realize that you could spend a year and still risk offending him. As a woman, you can never understand how a man's brain works. The main thing I took away from that letter is that he is no longer capable of satisfying you, and that no matter how good he is, he never will. You should know, Laura, that every man is a little paranoid about his work. The thought of leaving you for someone else who might be bigger or better only fuels that paranoia. Honestly, Laura, I can only see 2 reactions to him reading this. One is to give up and give in, and the other is to come out swinging. Well, I think you're wrong. I know my husband. He will appreciate my honesty and seriously consider it if I ask. Before I do something, it will be completely risk-free, Laura insisted. Pete looked at his future lover and thought about how much he believed her own nonsense. He was already seeing her in a new light. Sure, he was bending the truth to get that pass from his wife, but Laura's blatant lies and manipulation of her husband were alarming. Part genuine curiosity and part devilishness drove him to his next question. How did the Biggie33 story turn out for Laura? Did the lady get to drink all she could? He got his answer long before she opened her mouth. Her face suddenly became very serious. No, her husband kicked her out to distract her from her doubts about whether she was doing the right thing. Peter changed the subject. After all the effort and expense of this trip, the last thing he wanted was for her to wake up and actually do what the letter said. An innocent vacation. I didn't tell you about the weirdo I saw at international registration, did I? He was standing about 25 meters away from me while I was in line. When he saw me looking at him, he just stared at me and ran his index finger down my throat in a slap-smashing motion. I looked around to see if he was doing it to someone behind me, but there was no one. It was creepy. Laura asked nonchalantly, "Yes, what did he look like?" The world is full of strange, troubled people. That's the thing, Laura. He looked like a regular guy, over 6 feet, dark hair, goatee. Peter stopped when Laura suddenly sat up straight and started up her laptop again. Starting it up, she opened several files. She pulled up a picture of herself, a man standing in front of the house. In a voice trembling with worry, she asked, "Is that him?" "It could be, Laura. It certainly looks a lot like him, but I can't be sure." Laura looked intently at Peter. Did he have an incentive to lie to her? Was he afraid that if she was sure her husband had figured out their game, she would become unavailable to him for the next fortnight? For the first time, it occurred to Laura that Peter was a man who was willing to cheat on his wife and, therefore, fundamentally untrustworthy. What was that guy wearing, Pete? That's another female issue, Laura. Guys don't notice what other guys are wearing. Didn't you say he dropped you off at the domestic terminal? Yeah, that's him. I convinced him to just drop me off and leave. When I saw him leaving, I took the bus to the international terminal so he'd have to go back to his car, drive to the international terminal, and park, and then find out who to chase in the check-in line. Pretty unlikely, Laura. I think it's more likely that it was just a random psycho. Is that your house in the picture, Laura? Laura, who also wanted a distraction and was used to people complimenting her about her house, went on autopilot. Yes, it is. It's nice, isn't it? We bought a plot on the beach as an investment. It's very steep and narrow. You wouldn't believe the house is collapsible, would you? It took my husband 15 years, but he kept adding on and on to it and landscaping around it. You should see the inside of it. He is an artist, and each room has murals with a theme, nautical theme in the bathrooms and living room, business theme in the study. You walk into the study, and the atmosphere says work, and you work. I'm not going to tell you what the theme is in the bedroom. We've won all kinds of awards for the interior design and the way the house utilizes the land. There's even a creek running under the house. The conversation turned to the topic of their families, which they had so far skirted in their relationship. They talked about Pete's 2 children, ages 6 and 8. Laura talked about her 3, Sarah, a 23-year-old who had just graduated from law school and was working as a real estate lawyer, and her 2 children still at home, Daniel, 16, and Larry, 13. Laura didn't know it, but she tried desperately to distract herself. For a while, she succeeded. Then she pulled out a notepad and wrote lawyer, home, and children. Not knowing if her husband was following her, she couldn't make any plans for him. She knew she had to back herself up by protecting the house and family. After the couple fell silent, Laura began to berate herself for being a coward and not thinking about her position or the possible situation. She pieced together the chronology of events she had packed on Thursday night, being careful not to include anything non-business or unwarranted to wear on the weekend. Between the 2 weekly courses, bikinis, and intimate apparel she planned to buy in Bali that evening. Her husband behaved perfectly normally, and they made love on Friday. She went to work at her normal time. They wanted to do some serious work on her company car, so she arranged for her husband to pick her up on Friday afternoon. He went into the reception area, waited for her to pack up, and drove her home. They had lunch with the kids, drove them to their grandparents' house, and then made love until late at night. She was especially horny in anticipation of the next night and because of her husband's ignorance. Saturday morning, an early rise, a trip to the airport. Laura remembered how nervous she'd been when she suggested her husband just take her bags to the check-in line and leave them. Other times, he stayed until the plane took off. She was relieved when he immediately agreed. She'd watched him all the way to the parking lot and then waited for his car to pull away. Now, his impatience to leave took on a darker meaning. She compared his behavior last night and today to her careful planning. Hell, no one from her job knew anything except that she'd taken annual leave, and her husband didn't know anyone from her job at all. He had no way of knowing what she was planning. The text message that came to Pete's phone was a prank call from a friend. The guy staring at him in the check-in area was a random psycho. Relax, Laura, she thought. What would be the consequences if he found out she'd lied to him about her destination? So what? The letter said she was traveling with a friend from work but didn't specify if it was a man or a woman. She didn't realize she'd closed her eyes until they opened. She imagined her husband knowing her final destination at the airport and realized how it would look to him. The deception would have to look like she had slipped away. Precisely to hide that in itself was serious, but with some skill, it could be defended. Combined with the contents of the letter, however, it was not in the slightest doubt. Laura used the rest of the flight to cover whatever she could. The first priority was to destroy the letter lying under a pillow 2,500 kilometers from her ass. The second priority was to convince herself that she was worrying too much about nothing. Laura, always ready to anticipate every contingency, wrote a long letter to Sarah, knowing she couldn't send it before Bali. In it, she begged her daughter to go to her house and do two things. The first was to take possession of her phone and switch it to Pete's number. She reasoned that she was embarrassed to tell anyone that she had forgotten it, and she had bought a prepaid phone for the trip. The second task was to retrieve the letter from under her father's pillow. She begged not to read it, as it was deeply personal. Written between husband and wife, mother and daughter were very close, so she knew she could trust her to not only follow the instructions, but to be discreet about it. As an addendum, Laura asked Sarah to acknowledge receipt of the letter and to further notify her that she had done what she had been asked to do. As soon as Pete and Laura got off the plane at Denpasar Airport, Laura sent an email and then, figuring her husband wouldn't check the caller ID, called him from Pete's phone. None of her calls were answered, then or during the hour it took to get through customs and get to their hotel. This had never happened before, and alarm bells were ringing in her head just before the cab pulled up to the hotel. Sarah called Pete's phone and confirmed that she had done as requested. Laura managed to dodge a few questions about what was going on. When Sarah asked if her father was okay, her answer horrified her mother. Her father had called to say that he had some things to think about and that he was taking the other children to his cabin in the country. Sarah was going to join them that evening. Laura asked her husband what he intended to do this weekend, and the answer, of course, did not include the cabin. Worse, the cabin was isolated from all 21st century modes of communication. Laura was so confused that she let her daughter make the call without further question. Chapter 2. Laura's husband had just cooked a barbecue dinner for his 3 children at the cottage. They were begging him to take them camping with him to get wabi for their favorite campfire stew tomorrow. Sarah sensed her father had been distracted since she arrived, but didn't press him. They sat down for a family meeting, and Sarah started the conversation. Is it because of Mom, Dad? Yeah, she's been acting weird for months now, kinda emotionally withdrawn. And yesterday and this morning, I learned some funny things. The sense of horror that gripped the room was only compounded by the father's sigh that completed the statement. They knew him as a strong but jovial man who was rarely serious. They waited. Your mom told me she's going on a 2-E course overseas for work, he continued. All 3 children responded that that's exactly what she told them yesterday afternoon. She asked me to pick her up from work, so I did. Standing in the waiting room, I saw through the office glass that she was talking to a man in his office. Something about the way they were standing or looking at each other didn't seem right. She didn't come out for more than 5 minutes, and I wandered around the reception area. There's a wall hung with pictures of all the high-ranking people in the company. I recognized the guy she was talking to. His name is Peter Auer. I picked up his business card at the front desk this morning. I just couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs. I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but I looked in your mother's purse. In it, I found her passport, and upon looking through it, I discovered a visa stamp for Indonesia dated 3 weeks ago. I remembered seeing her reading a brochure about Bali last month. Their father paused and looked around the room, clearly contemplating what to say next. Bali is in Indonesia and is not interstate, it is overseas. I didn't say anything to your mother. It's very serious to accuse someone of cheating without proof, especially someone you love unconditionally, Sarah intervened. We know, Dad. We were raised on your and Mom's values, remember? Never cheat. Never lie. Always treat everyone with respect until they lose their respect, and then just quietly walk away. Yes, that's why what happened this morning is so hard to understand, let alone talk about. The gloomy atmosphere in the room intensified. They gave my father as much time as he needed to gather his thoughts and decide what to say and how to say it. This morning, your mom asked me to just drop her off at the domestic terminal and leave. She said she was nervous about leaving you home alone for too long. Purely deliberately, I agreed and drove straight to the international terminal. I waited there near the check-in for flights to Bali and saw Mr. Peter Hours checking in. I hid and kept watching. 15 minutes later, your mother showed up and checked in as well. I was too stunned to confront her. Do you think? Sarah started to ask. Yes, Sarah, I think your mother lied to me, to us actually, and went to Bali to have an affair with someone she works with. The father turned away, but it was obvious to all 3 of his children that he was in great pain. They had never seen the great man cry, and they were willing to pay almost anything they had just to avoid seeing his obvious pain. Now, one by one starting with Daniel, they enclosed their father in an embrace. Sarah took the lead again. What are you going to do, Daddy? I just don't know, kids. I know that if she ever sleeps with another man, we're finished. Fidelity is the cornerstone of marriage, and any breach is unforgivable. If she hasn't and isn't sleeping with him, I still don't know if I can survive her cheating. So all I have done so far is send them both a message that if they touch each other, there will be trouble. That way, I can put off deciding what to do until I have a chance to make a decision. Does that make sense? Sarah nodded to everyone and then told him something he didn't know. Mom left her phone at home, Dad. She wouldn't have gotten your message. I know how to get in touch with her. Do you want me to tell her to leave that creep alone? Sarah asked. No, Sarah. I want her to answer for her own reasons. A decision made because of fear of the consequences is no decision at all. She has to have the right motivation. What number did she give you to contact her? Sarah pulled out her phone and opened the long letter from Laura. She read the first 6 digits to her father, and he read the last 4 to her from a business card he pulled from his pocket. By this simple act, all 4 people in the room were convinced of the absolute veracity of his story. There was silence. That's not all, Daddy, Mom said. I asked me to get a letter for you from under the pillow at home. She reached into her bag, pulled out the offending letter, and held it out to him. Everyone waited for him to read it. He objected to reading it aloud once he knew what it said. Young Larry, this letter is about our family. We have always made all the important decisions as a family. You have to tell us about it. Dave looked at his youngest son and realized he had never felt so proud. Here he was with his siblings at the center of the greatest crisis their family had ever faced, and he was handling it better than his own father. They were all coping. They hugged again, and then Dave started reading. He reread it 3 times, the second 2 times emphasizing the 3rd paragraph. Without the 3rd paragraph, it was a perfectly legitimate request from a wife to her husband, and if taken at face value, a perfectly mature proposal. However, one sentence in the 3rd paragraph mocked the entire message. I'm going away for 2 weeks with a friend from work. I have never been unfaithful to you, and without your full blessing, I never will be. One proven lie made the rest of the message suspect or just plain wrong. An hour-long, mature argument resulted in their mother and wife evaluating motives that were remarkably close to the truth. When other solutions were discarded, an obvious conclusion was reached, and a course of action was determined. Depending on the answers to one question, their mother probably no longer deserved to be a member of their family. Dave did his best to stand up for the absent party. Listen, children. If a crime was committed, it was against me as your mom's husband. You mustn't let it affect the way you feel about her. Once again, little Larry answered for everyone. No, Dad. The moment she lied to all of us, she kicked herself out. Dave looked intently at his son. When he saw the protruding chin and serious eyes, he realized that the acorn had not fallen far from the tree. Chapter 3. Laura stunned Pete at the hotel reception desk by asking for a private room on another floor. She had booked it for 2 days with an option to extend and a request for a right of first refusal if the room was completely full. Pete checked into the hotel and looked questioningly at Laura. He was told to think about it, go to his room, unpack, and meet her in the lobby in 2 hours. He embarrassedly complied. They met at the appointed time. Peter didn't waste time thinking about it, but when he saw what Laura was wearing, he decided he wouldn't mind jumping on her bones. They'd been close for a month, but other than kissing and groping, nothing had happened. What's wrong, Laura? Think about it, Peter. We arranged to come here together. You get a message on your phone addressed to you by name, telling you that if you lay a finger on this woman, you will regret it for the rest of your life. This message came shortly after a man who looks like my husband made a threatening gesture in your direction. Are you with me? We drove here, and my daughter informed me that my husband has been acting completely different than usual for the last 3 hours. My husband has not returned my calls, which again is not in his nature. Pete wasn't stupid. He understood what all this could mean, but he didn't see or care what it had to do with him. I think there's an 80% chance my husband knows we're here together. Don't ask me how he found out, I have no idea. I'm 100% sure that if he finds out we slept together, my marriage will be over. That's a price I don't want to pay. If I was 100% sure he knew, I would be on an airplane home by now. If I did, and he doesn't know, how the hell am I going to explain coming back so soon without telling an outright lie? We've been together for 25 years, he'll recognize a lie in a second if he's on guard. I'm sorry, Peter, but we're not sleeping together until I get my husband on the phone and convince myself he doesn't know anything. Peter looked visibly disappointed by this statement. Laura realized that he was going to argue about it, so she waved him away. Peter, if you were my husband and you suspected that I had gone on a date with another man, how would you act? Easy. I'd hire a private investigator and get proof. Laura watched logic break through the filters of lust in his head. She was still annoyed that the seriousness of her situation didn't penetrate his thick skull. Did you try calling your wife again after you arrived? It caught his attention. Peter immediately looked around the dark corners of the hall, trying to see the camera. Okay, now you get it. Tonight and tomorrow, I will sleep alone in my room. When my husband gets back from scrubbing and is able to call me, we'll work it out. In the meantime, don't come to my room, don't come near me unless it's a public place, and don't touch me. If my husband calls, do not answer or put the phone to voicemail. Find me as fast as you can. These are the numbers. He'll be calling from now. Give me a friendly kiss on the cheek, and we'll go our separate ways. Peter did as instructed, and then they both retreated to their rooms, looking around for surveillance. If either of them had bothered to look at the phone number that Pete's threat had come from, they would have realized that Laura was 80% already 100% a victim, she just didn't know it yet. Chapter 4. 4 days had passed, and the long-awaited trip had not gone according to plan. They had to eat in the hotel restaurant and avoid all physical contact. Laura dragged Peter, protesting, to numerous clothing stores for outfits, and they even went on a day trip together on Tuesday. If they were being followed, it was by professionals. Laura insisted that they spend all their days together in case Dave called. On Monday, Laura bought a discarded cell phone and had Pete practice switching to it in case he got a call. Her stress level only went up a little. The school vacation had arrived, and it was possible that Dave had taken Danielle and Larry to the cottage for more than one weekend. However, Sarah not answering emails was a serious concern. Peter held out until Tuesday evening. He retired early, booked an extra room, made sure no one was following him, and had sex all night with one of the imported Javanese prostitutes. On Wednesday, Laura was so concerned that she stayed in her room all day and did some research on the internet, researching about divorce. Then she emailed her in-home attorney and asked him to confirm her assumptions about the outcome of a hypothetical divorce. She used him to handle all of the family's personal legal matters. He responded that while it was not his expertise, he believed her assumptions were correct. 3 times a day, Dave and Sarah made phone calls and went unanswered. The 80% level began to approach 90%. Cut off emotionally from everyone she knew, she felt as lonely as she had ever felt in her life. She sent Sarah an email begging her to contact her. Dave didn't use email, with no response by Friday. Laura decided to secure her future. She asked her lawyer, who had all the necessary authorizations, to lock up the family finances. She transferred ownership of the only remaining vacant piece of land to a trust, with Sarah and herself as trustees. Any of the signatories could access the trust. She transferred the bulk of the family finances into 2 separate trusts in the names of their minor children. Again, there were 2 trustees, but this time both signatures were required, the child in question and another. She wanted the second one to be herself, of course, but the attorney persuaded her to make him the child's legal guardian. It would be more secure that way, he assured her. Of course, the child's signature was useless until he turned 18. Assured that if the worst happened, she'd have control of the purse strings, and if it all turned out to be a storm in a teacup, she could undo the changes. Laura slept better than she had all week. On Saturday, within an hour of each other, 2 bombshells arrived. The first came with Pete, who came to her room against her instructions, concerned that his wife was unresponsive. He contacted his brother and asked him to come to his house. The brother reported that he had done so. Pete's wife asked him where his brother wanted the divorce papers delivered. She called him at work and found out that he was not away on a business trip but was on annual leave. Well, that explained how Dave knew about it. Peter immediately flew home to try and deal with the aftermath. Laura immediately contacted her lawyer and had him sign off on all the changes, escorted Pete to the airport, and moved into his vacated room. The second bomb was closer to home and much more destructive. She decided to check the 2 younger children's Facebook accounts. Nothing had appeared there since she'd left, no clues as to what they had been up to and no responses to requests to contact her or otherwise acknowledge her existence. This time, there was a new message on Larry's account. It was announcing to all comers that his mother and father were getting a divorce. No, screamed Laura in an empty room, away from her family. What the hell was David doing? Divorce was followed by conversations, arguments, and explanations, yeah, even sometimes followed by humiliation. Kids. So she was the main breadwinner in the family and worked hard. It was inevitable when Dave dropped out after high school and kept her in college. Of course, that meant Dave was the primary influence in their kids' lives, but this guy had gone too far. She prayed, offering prayers to any god who might hear her, that she'd get the signs right and stop her and Pete's plans before they came to fruition. If that didn't happen, Dave would soon have an incontrovertible private investigator's report saying nothing had happened, and now that Peter was gone, nothing would. As she cooled down, she began to think rationally. When no one was talking to her, she used her considerable intellect to try to see dispassionately what Dave was seeing. She made some educated guesses. Someone had found out about her trip to Bali. That someone couldn't be Dave. The only evidence of the plan was on their home computer, and Dave was computer illiterate. This someone, probably Peter's wife, had told Dave, perhaps as early as the morning of the flight. All he could know was that she had lied about the destination and was traveling with Peter, unless the letter, if Sarah had ignored her instruction not to read the letter, if Sarah had shared its contents with her father. Laura quickly pulled out the letter and read it with her eyes fully open. It took 3 attempts, each accompanied by a rapid heartbeat. Point 1. Simple statement of facts, no questions asked. Point 2. Preparation to start twisting the truth, but otherwise facts. Point 3. Part truth, part complete lie. And now he could know it. He was a wonderful lover, but she was tired of being in his arms. It was obvious to her, and if he'd seen the letter, it was obvious to him. His private investigator report would show that having a friend here was inappropriate, and having a male friend her husband knew nothing about was inappropriate. In the cold light of rationality, she realized that if he had sent her this letter with an outright lie, everything else would immediately come under suspicion. Consequently, her assurances of fidelity would be useless. If she went back to the beginning, her saying that he was a wonderful lover would also be under suspicion. Suddenly, she realized what his main problem was. Peter was right. She had called into question Dave's entire belief that he was satisfying her. His ego would be badly wounded, but she hadn't betrayed him. The private investigator report should confirm that, at least as far as this trip was concerned. Naturally, he could assume she'd started fornicating even before this trip, but Laura already had a plan in place to counter such an opinion. When had the private detective started the surveillance? If the moment they first checked into this hotel, they should have already known that the private room idea was a thing. Laura thought, too many unknowns. The 4th paragraph, which had seemed so thoughtful and loving when she'd written it, was now assuming it was all a lie, just empty garbage. So was the whole letter, if you looked at it in hindsight. It had turned out to be a complete lie. Laura really hoped he hadn't seen it. Conclusion: if he hadn't seen the letter, she had some pretty fancy work to do. If he had, she suspected no amount of subterfuge would do any good. The irony of the situation almost brought a smile to her face. Her only savior at the moment was the private investigator's report, proving that nothing had happened in Bali. Laura hoped the private investigator was good, but took comfort in the fact that he was so good that she hadn't noticed him, even knowing of his presence. Laura mentally kicked herself. Why had she done that? It had taken a whole night of thinking under the influence of alcohol. Laura had come to the conclusion that she was the classic wife who had it all, who saw a future different from the past and resented it. A successful wife and high-flying businesswoman who had spent her entire career lying, hiding every possible option, and yes, cheating. A woman approaching menopause who had an itch that needed scratching and then relying on her cleverness and her husband's naivety to scratch it without consequence. The new irony didn't make her smile. Laura realized that she could soon be a successful businesswoman and a divorced woman who still hadn't scratched that damned itch. The next morning, with no chance of getting any answers to her questions here, Laura decided to go home as soon as possible. First, she decided to use her negotiation skills to delay the irreversible steps of her protagonist. She wrote a letter to David through Sarah. Laura made the letter vague because she didn't know if Sarah had shown the letter to her father or if she had even read it. Her plan was to try to get out of the divorce situation, but to count on the fact that she would be on the winning side if the worst happened. Since she was the kind of person who had foreseen everything, she found counselors in her town and made an appointment online with the one she chose. Then she dressed for the day tour she had booked 4 days ago. She would still have time to call the airline. Chapter 5. Sarah walks into her father's house and overhears the end of a conversation between her father and his neighbor. So besides telling this guy, Peter's wife, about your suspicions, what else did you do, Dave? Nothing. Hi, Sarah. You know John Smith from next door, right? He's a lawyer too. He's kindly agreed to give me some advice. Oh, come on, Dave. After all the landscaping advice and help you've given me over the years, not to mention all the tools you've lent me, this is the least I can do. Hi, Sarah. Hey, John. Are you here to help Daddy with his divorce? Well, who's talking about divorce? All we know for sure so far is that your mother lied to us and is spending 2 weeks in Bali with someone. I, for one, We'll wait to see what she has to say before I make a decision about the divorce. Please forgive my absent-minded father, John. He can be very naive at times. Yesterday, Mom's lawyer called me in to sign a trust agreement that effectively takes away Dad's control of some of the family assets. Then we checked all the bank and investment accounts and found that most of it has disappeared somewhere. She's doing everything she can to get you off the hook, Dad. Admit it, and now this finally reveals her true colors. Sarah handed her father 2 pages of the printed letter. He read them and then handed them to John. Dear Sarah, would you please print out the attached document and give it to your father again? I'm relying on your discretion not to read it. It concerns personal matters between him and myself. Dear David, I suppose you have already realized that I lied to you about the purpose and destination of my trip this week. When I get back, we'll talk about it, and hopefully, you'll listen to my apology for the huge mistake I made with the same patience you've always shown. Just know 2 things, and please don't do anything until we talk. 1. I love you and only you. Always have and always will. 2. Ever since we became exclusive all these years, I've been faithful to you. I've never once had sex with anyone but you. I admit that my actions of late have given you ample reason to doubt this, and I am willing to do whatever is necessary to convince you of this basic fact. I suggest you give me a lie detector test when I return, hopefully in the next day or so. I am quite willing to stop and take it on the way home from the airport if you can arrange it. That way, you will provide questions and ask whatever you want. After this elephant is out of the room, I can apologize for any disrespect you feel I have shown you. Please, please, please don't do anything rash. We both know what a divorce will do. You'll lose the house you've put your heart into and half the money we plan to use for early retirement. Think about the children. Divorce always polarizes families, and if you ask around, the mother always gets custody. Having Sarah and Danielle on my side is a given. It would be tragic if divorce drove a wedge between them and Larry. I know you love the kids, and we both realize that not being able to see them whenever you want would kill you. So please don't do anything until you've given me a chance to explain. See you soon, your loving wife, Laura. John finished reading the letter. If it wasn't for what we know she was doing behind the scenes, it would have been really compelling emotional material. What do you mean, John? Dave asked. You have to realize that in my work, I see all sorts of tricks. This one is pretty common. Your wife decides she wants out of the marriage, she looks for a replacement, finds one, and decides to, take her for a test drive during a 2-week vacation. I think it's called an affair on the road. Normally, if she decided he was the one, she'd come back and quietly move all the assets out of your reach and then file for divorce. The really smart people poison the relationship between innocent parents and their children first, like Laura started doing with Sarah. Writing a letter portraying you as a wimp that Sarah was allowed to find is one of the most subtle things I've ever seen. The best way to win in a divorce is to deal your partner a complete blow, limit their access to good advice, that is, leave you penniless, and then make your children choose who to go with. In this case, the choice will be between a mother's welfare in the family home and a broke father living in the slums. Surely there must be another explanation. I can prove it. Contact 3 of the best divorce attorneys in town. The one-on-ones who refuse to take your case are already representing her. I bet she gave all 3 of them an upfront fee to keep you out of the case. If you go broke and get a better lawyer, this bluff has a better chance of working. What's the bluff? This whole letter is a bluff, Dave. Her lawyer must have already told her that getting custody of kids as old as yours isn't as easy as it used to be, especially since you have a good chance of being considered the primary caregiver. Dave, the purpose of this letter is simple. She wants you to stop doing anything while she finalizes preparations for the ambush. Her problem is that you found out about her plan before it was fully worked out. When her plan is finalized, she will want the divorce finalized as soon as possible, certainly before Larry turns 18 and can decide which house he wants to live in. You can expect her to force you to see a counselor. In this country, the courts will only grant a divorce if you have lived apart for 12 months or if a counselor says the marriage is irretrievable. Expect her to pick a counselor and intimidate you. Threats at the end are common for women to instigate divorce these days. Dave excused himself by asking John who the best divorce lawyer in the area was. Dave called, gave his name, and asked for an appointment. He was told they could not accept his case. Dave didn't realize that the best divorce attorney in town had a lot of cases, and he told his secretary not to accept any new ones yet. Dave went back to the break room. "All right, John. I believe you. What do I do now?" "First, you authorize me to block all finances not already in Laura's possession. Then you restrict her ability to spend any other shared finances." "How do I do that?" "We'll start by canceling all credit cards and joint names." "Okay, but I'm still a little uncomfortable. I mean, she's so convincing that she still loves me, but it doesn't really fit with the threats in the second half of the letter." "Dad, are you sure Mom lied to you?" Yes, Sarah, do you lie to those you love, Daddy?" "No, I don't." "What did you always tell us about the 3 pillars of a successful partnership, Dad? Love, trust, and respect, didn't you? How many of those do you have left?" "1. Now that you mention it. And just how much is Mother showing you now?" "No, Tata." Chapter 6. When Laura went to pay a fine for changing her flight date, her 2 credit cards were declined. She rushed to an ATM she had used before. It was refused. She went into emergency planning mode. Hotel and meals had been paid for in advance, so she wouldn't starve to death or be thrown out on the street. She had a few hundred in traveler's checks just in case, but it wouldn't be enough. Since there were no friends at home to borrow money from, the only ones left were her parents. Asking them to wire her money would lead to questions she didn't want to answer. At the moment, she quickly sent an email to her lawyer asking what was going on with the bank accounts and then plunged into a boring now-spending week before her scheduled departure. She wondered how her simple and foolproof plan to scratch an itch could so quickly lead to Dave facing ruin. She knew he would never forgive infidelity and had knowingly taken the risk, knowing the chances of being caught were astronomical.